A new kind of star is born. You're watching Beyond the Trailer's review of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh my God.
We made contact! Military! They're already on their way!
Caesar, you have to go. Go where? This is my home. I'm sorry, my friend. War has begun.
Caesar!
For a while, it really stuck in Andy Serkis' craw that he couldn't get a goddamn Oscar nomination. As we've discussed before, Serkis is the Lon Chaney of a new digital era, going beyond mere makeup and prosthetics to create his characters. His Gollum is perhaps the most memorable character out of The Lord of the Rings, and his work as Caesar in Rise of the Planet of the Apes was groundbreaking. Fox even felt so, waging an Oscar campaign on his behalf, which was fruitless. But Serkis still wound up with some gold, as Fox, who'd only signed him for one Apes pick, agreed to pay him 7 figures, that's in the millions, to reprise the role of Caesar for the sequel. And on top of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where Caesar continues to be a lead character, Serkis is set to make his directorial debut over at Warner Brothers for The Jungle Book, where he'll utilize his vast experience to bring to life all kinds of animals via motion capture. Oh, and he's also in a little movie called Star Wars Episode 7, and probably Episode 8 and 9. No word yet on who he'll play, but odds are he'll be once again donning the dots to portray the kind of unique character so pivotal to the Star Wars brand. Sure, J.J. Abrams is largely going back to practical special effects, but Serkis is a special effect unto himself, one that Abrams would be crazy not to utilize. Yes, Serkis not only breathes life into these digital creations, but gives them a soul as well. And now Serkis has company, as Dawn features an entire cast of apes, including Toby Kebbell as Koba, Judy Greer as Cornelia, and Doc Shaw as Ash. Yep, even young actors are getting into motion capture. As their numbers grow, how much longer can the Academy ignore them? It's a strategy that worked out pretty well for the apes. But is Serkis really the only important ingredient in the revitalization of this franchise? Rise director Rupert Wyatt was eager to make a sequel, but was forced to drop out when he felt uncomfortable with the timetable Fox was insisting on. He was replaced by Matt Reeves, who previously helmed far less successful movies Cloverfield and Let Me In. And while Rise screenwriters Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silva return, this time they've been rewritten by Steven Soderbergh's frequent collaborator Scott Z. Burns. And then all 3 were rewritten by Mark Baumbach, who wrote The Wolverine and the Total Recall remake. Uh-oh. But Fox seems to be happy, as they've already signed Reeves and Baumbach to return for a 3rd installment. Jaffa and Silver have not been confirmed for that 3rd installment, but maybe they're too busy writing Avatar 2 and 3? Let's face it, no matter how good Serkis might be, he still, like every actor, needs a good script and director. If Andy Serkis doesn't get an Oscar nomination for his performance here, then the actors, which are the biggest voting bloc of the Academy, are simply worried about being replaced by CGI skins going forward. Because job security is the only reason not to nominate him here, because he's just so phenomenal. However, though, it is the Andy Serkis show. I talked about in the open about how he needs a good script and a good director, but I think he has to some degree those elements here. He does have that support, but Andy Serkis is so amazing as Caesar in this film that is what grounds the entire piece. And I think if it wasn't for his performance, this would come across much more as a, B-level sci-fi picture than I think the A-level film that it is to me. I say to me, though, the reason I kind of give it that little asterisk is because everyone I've talked to personally who's seen this film, and in my circle of friends, hasn't enjoyed it. And their chief complaint is that the apes just seem too human. They're like, you just replaced humans with apes. They don't seem particularly ape-like, although to me, I kind of think that's the point. But I think that the people I talked about this movie to felt they wanted more of that animal element. They just felt it was like you just had people with ape skins on talking about replacing skins. But as I said, I like that. To me, while that might be disappointing to other people, I think that's good genre bending. And for instance, Alien was so iconic and such a big deal because it basically was a horror film, set in space. It was a horror film with sci-fi elements, but the structure was a horror film. And I kind of think the same thing is going on here, but with a Western. This is, yes, the classic
settlers versus Indians story that we've seen so many times, but it seems fresh, at least to me, because they've added this sci-fi element of replacing the Indians with this new evolved species of apes. And I liked it. I mean, I just had a great time watching how good these ape characters were on screen, how well they were realized. And I know there's an argument going around what the Academy has been using up to this point about, it's the CGI is doing most of the acting work. The acting performance is just such a small part of what you're seeing in the final product that you can't nominate it. But, if actors can be nominated wearing prosthetics, etc., I see no reason why these digital prosthetics can't be seen the same way. But there must be some human element that's in making these performances better, because I think that the performances in this film are better than any other motion capture performances I've ever seen. And not just from Serkis. Of course, he's the big standout, but I think that Toby Kebbell as Koba is phenomenal. And then also Nick Thurston, who plays, I believe that's his name, let me just check. Yes, Nick Thurston, who plays Andy Serkis' son, Blue Eyes, is also phenomenal. I think he does a really good job in his role. So it's interesting to see that while Serkis, of course, is still the leader, both in the movie and in this, motion capture acting movement, others are following in his footsteps, and I think are doing a very noticeable job. And I think that's what the actors are worried about, that you won't recognize their talent. But just like people, I think, really appreciate great voice work and animation, I think there's going to become a fan base, obviously, for great motion capture work. And look, it landed Serkis a gig in Star Wars, right? As for the human characters, they really could not compare with the apes. And to me, that's because, one, they were underwritten, and two, the actors they cast really didn't have very strong on-screen personas. They just kind of faded away. And as for Gary Oldman, you think, Gary Oldman, he never fades away. But he has a different problem. And I have to say, and I know some of you are going to disagree with me on this, and so I have a quote to really drive home my point. But after some of the things he said in that Playboy article that we've been discussing a little bit here on Beyond the Trailer and over on Movie Math, my Movie Math new channel, I can't watch Gary Oldman anymore after the things he said. They were so despicable. And the one that bothered me the most is what he said about Philip Seymour Hoffman. After his death, it's just so disrespectful and appalling that I'm just kind of done with Gary Oldman. And the exact quote, for those of you who are like, come on, Grace, how bad can it be? Well, judge for yourself. He said in regards to Philip Seymour Hoffman, he said, and I quote, this is from the Playboy article, you can look it up, Gary Oldman said, "I don't mean this disrespectfully, but maybe he looked in the mirror and always saw that very pale sort of fat kid. It's a real tragedy for his family." Yeah, Gary Oldman, it's a shame that Philip Seymour Hoffman had such low self-esteem. It's just such a disgusting thing to say about Philip Seymour Hoffman, even if he was alive. But to say it about someone who, tragically died from a drug overdose because they did have problems. Maybe he had problems because of people like you, Gary Oldman, who were calling him a pale fat kid, even as one of the greatest actors of his generation. They had a trailer in front of this movie for a Most Wanted Man, I believe, and it looked phenomenal. And it's just, Gary Oldman, I'm done with Gary Oldman, as I said. So the film, the other thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to do a spoiler review, so I hope you'll check that out. But the other thing that I really think deserves a shout out is the score. I want to make sure I pronounce his name correct. Michael Giacchino, who did a lot of the scores for Pixar, and particularly The Incredibles, does a phenomenal job with the score here, and I think it really is a big part of why this works. Not only was it refreshing not to have another homage to Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer's work in The Dark Knight. These days all scores try and capture that booming sound, which was used so effectively there, but I think at this point it's overexposed. But I like the fact that even though he always kind of has like a 1960s feel to his music, particularly The Incredibles, this reminded me a lot of his Incredibles soundtrack. I think Michael Giacchino's choice to do a 1960s flavor to this soundtrack was really brilliant because it kind of tied the movie to the original, of course, Planet of the Apes film from the 1960s. And it tied it together, even though this was such a modern film in other aspects, in other regards. So I liked it. Was it the most original film I've ever seen? No. And I think it can't compare to the origin story that was Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Origin stories are tough to beat. But I appreciated it as a sci-fi western. Much better, of course, than Cowboys and Aliens, or Cowboys versus Aliens. So I'm curious to know what you guys thought. Which camp were you in? Were you in the, it's just apes as humans, they're too human? Or were you as fascinated as I was by what's being done here in terms of motion capture acting and, the other elements. I just liked it. And I also thought it was funny to see all these people so excited about a Planet of the Apes movie, and that Fox should be very happy that they have certainly revived this franchise quite successfully, in a smart way, which I really appreciate. I'll get more into the script over in my spoiler review, but I did think it was very solid. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in. You can check out my spoiler review and other episodes right now.